Why did you spill all the milk? Please don't yell. My baby sister is hungry.
Leah, a freelance ASL interpreter with rent due and hope thin, slips into a glittering Boston Gala. In the corner, a 13-year-old stands alone, reading lips no one bothers to move. His father, Adrian Hale, a strikingly handsome CEO, smiles for cameras, not for him. Leah signs hello. The boy lights up. She fingers her Gala badge, a small dare. If she speaks for him tonight, what will it cost? She stood under a chandelier that looked like frozen rain, clutching a plastic badge that bent when she breathed. Leah told herself to act like she belonged. Smile at the volunteer, nod at the donors, keep moving. The Liberty Hotel pulsed with soft jazz and careful laughter. Waiters drifted by with trays of tiny tarts, the scent of citrus polish mixed with perfume. Outside the high windows, Boston winter held its breath, streetlights tunneling through the cold. She knew how to blend in for a living, to make her hands visible, but herself invisible. Freelance ASL interpreter, rent due. Next week, subway pass down to its last swipe. She had accepted the Gala voucher because it promised networking and community. Tonight, community wore tuxedos. She slid to the edge of the ballroom where the carpeting ended and old stone met new glass. The hotel had once been a jail. She could feel it in the hush between songs, in the way sound bounced off history before it reached your skin. Leah slipped a hand into her coat pocket and touched the thing she always carried. A scuffed index card, edges soft, with the ASL alphabet drawn in blue pen. Years ago, she had made it for a child who kept dropping his courage and needed somewhere to pick it up. She kept it for the same reason. When her fingers found the little square of paper, her breath steadied. Her mother used to say, "You do not need the right room to do the right thing. You only need the right moment." That was when she saw him. In a quiet corner near the service doors, a boy stood with his back to the wall, 13, maybe. Dark hair combed too neatly, a black suit that made him look small. His eyes scanned the room, tracking mouths and shoulders, reading the room the way she had learned to read a storm. His posture said, "Do not worry about me." His hands, loose at his sides, said, "I have been told to be easy." Leah watched people notice him by accident and then forget him on purpose. A couple glanced his way, smiled with their chins, and returned to their phones. A waiter paused, shifted the tray to the other hand, and moved on. No one spoke to him. No one signed. The music swelled, a camera flash burst like white heat, and the crowd tilted toward the center where donors were gathering. Her eyes landed on the boy again. He was reading lips, quietly, patiently, as if language were a door he could open with politeness. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. The whole event was about access, about inclusion. And yet, here he was, the hinge the door turned on, kept waiting in the cold. "Can I help you find your table?" a woman asked, cheerful and efficient, a clipboard balanced on her palm. "I found it," Leah said, even though she had not. "Thank you." The woman hurried away. Leah drifted toward the water station, filled a glass, and took a sip she did not want. The boy's gaze flicked to a cluster of photographers near the entrance. Leah followed his line of sight. Security parted people with practiced kindness. A figure moved through the gap. Leah did not recognize him yet, just the ripple he made in the air. Cameras lifted. The music softened on its own. She looked back at the boy. He stood a little taller, not hopeful, not afraid. Braced. Leah felt the small card in her pocket, the grooves of ink pressed long ago. She knew that stance. You learn it when adults make choices without you and call it love. Her phone buzzed with a reminder to send an invoice. She silenced it. She watched the boy. Then she watched herself. The version of her that would say later, "It was not my place." She set the glass down and crossed the carpet. Halfway there, a volunteer stepped between them with a tray of programs. "Gala Guide," the volunteer said. Tonight's schedule. Thank you, Leah murmured, taking one. She peered around the volunteer. The boy focused on a speaker across the room. The speaker's lips formed words Leah could catch at this distance. Access, future, leadership. A neat string of promises. Leah inched forward. The volunteer floated away like a buoy released. The boy glanced at her and looked away, already protecting himself from disappointment. She remembered a teenage girl in a hospital hallway who had flinched the same way when Leah's hands were slow. You do not get a second chance at a first hello. Leah lifted both hands where he could see them. She kept her movements small, respectful, not to turn him into a show. Hello, she signed in the air between them, a quiet door opening. My name is Leah. He blinked. Surprise softened his mouth. He answered, careful and quick. Hi, Eli. The room surged behind them. Applause breaking like surf as the donors welcomed someone important. Leah did not turn. Eli's eyebrows lifted, half a question, half a dare. She felt the card in her pocket, the old ink, her mother's voice. The applause swelled like a wave breaking against the walls of the ballroom. Leah turned slightly, just enough to glimpse the reason for all the noise. A tall man in a navy suit walked into the room as though the air itself made way for him. His stride was smooth, confident, practiced. Cameras snapped like firecrackers. He smiled, waved, shook hands. Not once did he glance toward the boy in the corner. Leah looked back at Eli. He hadn't moved. His hands rested at his sides, his jaw clenched in a way no 13-year-olds should. His eyes followed the man, not with longing, but with resignation, like someone who already knew how the night would play out. She signed slowly, testing her voice with her hands. That's your dad? Eli nodded once, lips pressing into a line. Then he looked back at her, a flicker of challenge crossing his face. He signed, Adrian Hale. The name rippled through Leah's memory. Adrian Hale, billionaire developer, the man whose company reshaped half the Boston skyline. She'd read headlines about his donations to accessibility programs, his public speeches about bridging divides. All of it looked good on paper, but here stood his son, tucked against a wall like a forgotten suitcase. You're reading lips, Leah said softly, her voice careful though she knew he could only catch fragments. He gave a small shrug. Signed, all the time. Leah's throat tightened. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but she didn't want to turn this moment into another burden. So she kept it simple. She signed, Do you like it here? His laugh came out silent but sharp, shoulders shaking once. He signed back, No one talks to me. I'm just decoration. The words stung. Decoration. As if the boy's presence was nothing more than a centerpiece beside his father's empire. Leah bit her lip, then signed quickly, You're more than that. What do you really like? His face shifted. For the first time, light sparked in his eyes. Robotics, he signed. Kinetic art. Machines that move like people, like breath. He mimed a little figure walking, his fingers nimble, precise. Leah smiled. That's amazing, she whispered, though her hands carried the truth of her admiration. For a moment, Eli looked 10 pounds lighter. The noise of the gala faded. It was just them, a boy who wanted to be seen, and a woman who remembered what it was like to stand on the edge of a room hoping someone would notice. But the spell snapped. A woman in a sharp black suit hurried over, an earpiece tucked neatly in place. She didn't acknowledge Leah. She touched Eli's shoulder, steering him forward. Time for photographs, she said briskly. Her smile was professional, her hand firm. Eli slipped into her direction without protest, his body folding back into its role. Leah watched his shoulders square, his face smooth into something polite and unreadable. He was no longer Eli the boy who loved robotics. He was Eli the accessory. The billionaire's son. They moved him across the room toward Adrian Hale. The man turned at last, his smile still set for the cameras. His hand rested lightly on his son's back, guiding him into position. Eli's face held nothing. Empty space behind glass. Leah's stomach twisted. Her fingers found the card in her pocket again, the edges bending under her grip. She wanted to march across the ballroom and demand why. Why smile for the world, but not for your own child? Why give millions to strangers while leaving silence at home? Instead, she stayed by the wall, unseen, her anger growing heavier with each flash of the cameras. She caught Eli's eyes just once more across the crowd. For a second, his mask slipped and she saw it, the ache, the loneliness buried under practice. Then the mask returned, and he was decoration again. The applause rose, and Leah's pulse rose with it. ChatGPT Danai. Adrian Hale stood beneath the chandelier as if the light itself bowed to him. His smile was smooth, polished, trained for headlines. Flashes lit his strong jawline, the streaks of gray in his dark hair catching like silver threads. His navy suit looked as though it had been stitched directly onto his broad shoulders. A red tie cut sharply across his chest, crisp as the man himself. Leah had seen his photographs before, in glossy magazines on waiting room tables. But photographs didn't show the way people bent their bodies toward him, the hush of deference that followed him like a second shadow. He radiated success, authority, presence. And yet, he hadn't once looked at his son. She watched Eli standing at his father's side, stiff as marble. The boy's eyes followed every flash, every reporter's lips, every hand extended toward his father. Adrian placed a hand on Eli's shoulder for the cameras, but the touch was weightless, impersonal. When the shutters closed, his hand slipped away like nothing had been there at all. Leah's nails dug into the folded Gala program she still held. She wanted to shake Adrian, force him to see the boy right next to him, the child who had just lit up when he talked about robotics, the child who laughed without sound but with his whole chest when someone bothered to ask. Instead, she watched as Adrian swept into the crowd, leaving Eli standing alone again, his small frame swallowed by the suits and gowns. The assistant stayed close, like a shepherd ensuring the boy did not stray. Leah pressed the card in her pocket. She felt its worn edges and thought of her mother's words. The right moment. Was it here? The boy caught her eyes once more, his mouth curved almost invisibly. It wasn't a smile, it was an acknowledgement, a flicker of recognition that she had seen him, that for once he wasn't invisible. The band played softly in the background, some jazz number that no one really listened to. Adrian raised a glass, speaking into a microphone, his voice rolling smooth and strong. "We gather tonight," he said, "to celebrate progress, inclusion, and the future we are building together." Leah almost laughed. The words felt like polished glass, reflecting everything but holding nothing. Inclusion. Progress. Yet his own son stood 10 feet away, locked behind silence. She shifted closer to the terrace doors, needing air. From there she could still see Eli, still watch the cameras swallow him whole. The boy's face was steady now, carefully blank. The face of someone who had learned early that being overlooked hurt less if you pretended not to care. Her throat tightened. She thought of the hospital hallway years ago, of a teenage girl gripping her hands desperately, of the guilt she carried for not moving faster, not being better. She would not repeat that mistake. Not tonight. But before she could move toward Eli, the assistant touched the boy's arm again, steering him toward the terrace for another photo beside his father. Adrian glanced at his son only long enough to pose. Then his eyes went back to the audience, to the cameras, to the donors whose applause echoed like thunder. Leah's hand curled around the card in her pocket until the edges cut her palm. She took a breath, steady but fierce. If no one else would speak, she would. The terrace doors opened. Cold air swept inside, lifting the edges of her hair. And with it came a certainty. She was going to confront Adrian Hale. The terrace air was sharp with winter, the kind that cut across your skin and cleared every lie from your lungs. Leah stepped outside, her heels clicking against the stone floor once used by guards when this hotel had been a prison. She thought the irony fitting. Tonight, silence was its own cell. Adrian stood near the balustrade, a glass of champagne balanced in his hand. The city lights stretched behind him, the Charles River a silver ribbon in the dark. He looked untouchable, Boston's king in his castle. Eli lingered a few steps away, posture stiff, eyes lowered. The assistant hovered nearby, watchful, like Eli was a fragile exhibit. Leah's pulse thudded, but she moved forward anyway. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice steady. He turned, polite surprise crossing his face. Up close, he was almost too handsome. Deep blue eyes, square jaw, every line of his suit perfect. But the warmth in his smile was a mask, and she saw right through it. "Yes?" he asked. "Are you with the press?" "I'm with the truth," she said before she could stop herself. Her hands trembled, but she held his gaze. "And the truth is, it's ironic you donate millions for accessibility when you can't communicate with your own son." The assistant bristled. "Excuse me." Adrian lifted a hand, silencing her. His eyes narrowed, curiosity flickering. "That's a bold assumption." "It's not an assumption." Leah's voice was low, but every word carried. "I saw him, standing alone. Not one person spoke to him, not even you." Eli's eyes lifted at that, sharp and searching. Adrian's jaw tightened. "This is a private matter," he said smoothly, his tone clipped, "and I don't discuss my family with strangers." "Maybe you should," Leah said, "because your son isn't a stranger. He's a boy who deserves more than being a prop in your speeches." For a moment, the mask cracked. Adrian's eyes darkened and something raw flickered there. Anger, maybe guilt. But then it was gone. He set his glass on the railing, straightened, and gave her a smile that belonged to boardrooms. "Thank you for your concern. Enjoy the gala." Dismissal. Neat, clean, final. Leah should have walked away, but she couldn't. She glanced at Eli, whose face had already shifted back into neutrality, and she knew she had struck something true, even if Adrian refused to admit it. She reached into her coat pocket, her fingers brushing the soft edges of the card she carried. She thought of giving it to Eli, of placing it in his hand right now, but no, the moment wasn't yet. Instead, she met Adrian's gaze one last time. "You can ignore me," she said softly, "but you can't ignore him forever." For the first time, Adrian had no ready reply. His silence followed her back into the ballroom. Behind her, Eli's eyes stayed fixed on his father, the faintest spark of hope and defiance flickering in their depths. The gala stretched on, but Leah could no longer hear the speeches or the jazz band. Her confrontation clung to her skin like static. She kept to the edges of the ballroom, watching the boy instead of the billionaires. Eli stood near his father again, framed for another round of photographs. Adrian smiled easily for the cameras, raising his glass, shaking hands. His son was positioned just to the side, a silent ornament to the man's success. Each flash of light carved a little more distance between father and son. Leah could see Eli's expression shift into that practiced blankness, a face that revealed nothing. He looked like a statue cast in a mold he never agreed to wear. Leah's stomach twisted. She had seen enough, but just as she started toward the boy, Adrian's assistant intercepted him. "Photos with your father," she instructed briskly. Her tone carried no warmth. Eli followed without protest, slipping back into role. The crowd cheered when Adrian wrapped an arm lightly across his son's shoulders. The boy's face remained composed, eyes dulled. For the cameras, he was the image of a proud heir. For himself, he was decoration once more. Leah clenched the gala program in her hand so tightly it tore at the spine. She couldn't stand to watch. She slipped through the crowd toward the refreshment table, her heart pounding with anger. Her mind flashed back to earlier. Eli's quick fingers describing robots that moved like breath, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of art and science. That spark had been real, but now it was gone, smothered beneath the weight of performance. A waiter passed, offering her a tart. She waved it away. All she wanted was to step outside, to breathe. But then, movement caught her eye. Across the room, Eli glanced her way, just for a heartbeat. Their eyes locked. His face softened, only slightly, but enough. She saw the flicker of recognition, the memory of their brief connection. Then the moment was gone. The assistant nudged him forward, and he was lost again to the sea of cameras. Leah's hands found the card in her pocket. She pressed it hard against her palm, as if the inked alphabet drawn years ago could remind her how to be brave now. She whispered to herself, "Not yet, but soon." Because she knew this story wasn't finished. Not for her, not for him, and as Adrian Hale raised another toast to inclusion and progress, Leah felt her anger rise like a tide. She would not let the boy disappear into silence again. The night air outside the Liberty Hotel carried the tang of river wind and the faint hum of traffic. Leah slipped onto the terrace again, her chest tight with words she hadn't meant to speak, but couldn't take back. She leaned against the stone railing, forcing her breath steady. She had called out a billionaire in his own house of mirrors. That should have been the end of it, except it wasn't. Footsteps scraped behind her. She turned and saw him, Adrian Hale, tall, commanding, his red tie catching a sliver of city light. He dismissed the assistant with a flick of his hand. Then his eyes locked on Leah's, and for the first time all evening, there was no mask. "You have a sharp tongue," he said, voice even but low. "Most people don't dare speak to me that way. Most people aren't watching your son get ignored in a room full of people claiming to celebrate inclusion." Leah's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. His jaw clenched, the muscle tight near his ear. "You think you understand, but you don't. This is my family. It's private." Leah stepped closer, her hands trembling at her sides. "Eli isn't a line in your biography. He's a child. He's hurting, and you—" her breath caught, "you don't even try to reach him." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Adrian turned toward the city, his reflection pale in the glass behind him. "Do you know what it's like to bury yourself in work just to survive?" His voice roughened, the Polish slipping. "To lose the one person who understood you and be left with a boy you don't know how to fix?" Leah's heart tightened. She wanted to say that Eli didn't need fixing, that he needed his father, but the words caught in her throat. Adrian looked back at her, steel returning to his tone. "This conversation is over." He adjusted his cufflinks, slipping the mask back on. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." He turned to go inside, but Leah's voice stopped him cold. "One day, he'll stop waiting for you, and when that happens, no donation will buy him back." For the first time, Adrian faltered. His hand lingered on the door. He didn't answer. He walked inside without another glance. Leah remained on the terrace, shaking, the card in her pocket pressed so hard it bent. She had spoken what no one else would dare. But as she looked through the glass at Eli standing silently in the ballroom, she feared it hadn't been enough. Not yet. The morning light in Beacon Hill carried a quiet dignity, slanting across brick sidewalks and iron railings polished by centuries of footsteps. Leah adjusted her scarf, still unsure why she had agreed to come. The envelope had been delivered by courier, embossed with Adrian Hale's company seal. She had opened it expecting a reprimand, maybe even a legal threat. Instead, it was an invitation. Her heart had thudded against her ribs as she read the words. "Mr. Hale requests your presence at his residence tomorrow morning. Private matter." Now, standing before a black iron gate that opened into a mansion with high windows and a view of the river, Leah wondered if she'd been foolish to come. She touched the worn card in her coat pocket, the ASL alphabet she still carried, and reminded herself, the right moment. A butler opened the door. "Mr. "Hale is expecting you," he said, ushering her inside. The house was quiet, hushed with wealth. Oil paintings lined the walls, their gilt frames catching sunlight. A grand piano sat untouched in the corner, polished but lifeless. The silence here felt different than Eli's. It felt chosen. Adrian appeared at the far end of the hallway. He looked as impeccable as always, but today there was something softer in his face. His confident smile was absent. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice lower than she'd ever heard it. Leah kept her arms crossed, her pulse steady. "I thought you'd want me arrested." "Not invited." A corner of his mouth twitched. "I considered it," he admitted, "but you said something last night, something I couldn't shake." He led her into a study with the tall shelves and a fire burning low. The room smelled of old wood and faint tobacco. On the desk sat a framed photograph of a woman with kind eyes holding a much younger Eli in her lap. Adrian noticed Leah's gaze. His expression tightened. "Catherine, my wife, Eli's mother." He paused, drawing a slow breath. "She died when Eli was 8, a month after he lost his hearing to meningitis." Leah's chest ached. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded once, as though he had trained himself to accept condolences like invoices, expected, routine. "I buried myself in work. It was the only way I knew to survive. I told myself tutors and specialists could give Eli what I couldn't." Leah studied him. Beneath the flawless suit and sculpted jawline was a man haunted by choices that still bled. "What Eli needed," she said carefully, "wasn't a tutor. It was you." Adrian's eyes darkened, but there was no anger this time, only weariness. He sank into a leather chair, the weight of his empire suddenly visible on his shoulders. "You're right, and I don't know how to fix that." Leah sat across from him. "You don't fix it. You learn. You show him you're willing." Silence stretched. Then Adrian leaned forward, his voice almost breaking. "Teach me. Teach me how to speak to my son." Leah blinked. She hadn't expected apology, let alone request. Her hand brushed the card in her pocket, as if the little square of paper had led her here. "You really want this?" she asked. Adrian met her eyes, and for once there was no mask. "I want my son back." The fire crackled, the photograph watching over them like a witness. Leah exhaled slowly and nodded. "Then we start today." Adrian led Leah through a sunlit corridor toward a smaller sitting room that looked nothing like the grand halls of his Beacon Hill mansion. The walls were lined with Eli's drawings, intricate sketches of gears, circuits, and half-built machines. On a side table sat a little metal bird with crooked wings, its body patched with wires. Leah picked it up gently. "He made that when he was 9, Adrian said quietly. "It flapped twice before it fell apart. He left it here after his mother's funeral. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away." Leah set the bird down carefully, her chest tightening. Symbols of silence and memory filled this house, yet they were dusted and displayed like relics in a museum. Eli's voice lived here, but no one had been listening. Adrian poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. His hands trembled slightly, though his gaze stayed steady. "Eli stopped talking to me after Catherine died. At first, I thought it was grief. Then, the doctor said the meningitis had damaged his hearing permanently. Overnight, our world became gestures I didn't understand." He swallowed hard. "I told myself if I worked harder, earned more, I could give him everything. But the truth is, I gave him nothing that mattered." Leah felt the weight of his words. For a moment, the polished CEO mask slipped away completely, revealing a father who had hidden behind skyscrapers because he didn't know how to face his own son. "Adrian," she said softly, "Eli doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to show up, clumsy and all. He needs to see you try." He looked at her as though she had offered him a language he had long forgotten. His deep blue eyes glistened, unguarded. "Teach me something simple," he said. "Just one phrase I can use today." Leah pulled the index card from her pocket. the one with the ASL alphabet drawn in fading ink. She smoothed its edges and slid it across the table. "This got me through when I was learning. Let's start with something every child needs to hear." She lifted her hands and signed slowly, clearly, "I love you." Adrian hesitated, then copied her movements, his fingers stiff, uncertain. It wasn't smooth, but it was honest. "Good," Leah said, her voice catching with something unexpected. "Now, again, until your hands remember." They practiced, the fire crackling softly nearby. Each time he stumbled, he corrected himself, his frustration clear, but his determination stronger. After a dozen tries, his hands moved with something like grace. Leah smiled. "Now you're ready to tell him, not just show him off." Adrian exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "I've closed billion-dollar deals," he murmured, "but that—" He looked down at his hands, still trembling. "That might be the hardest thing I've ever learned." Leah folded the card back into her pocket, the symbol that had guided her here. She studied him, the billionaire who seemed so untouchable in public but was breaking open in private. "This isn't about fixing Eli," she said gently. "It's about fixing you, one phrase at a time." And for the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Hale nodded like a man ready to begin again. The lessons began awkwardly. In Adrian's study, sunlight poured through tall windows, painting dust motes like flecks of gold. Leah sat across from him at a heavy oak desk, guiding his hands slowly, patiently. "Finger spell your name," she instructed, demonstrating each letter. Adrian's brows furrowed as he tried. "A, D, R, wait, I mixed that up." His hands tangled, movements stiff. Leah chuckled softly. "It's okay. You're not closing a deal here. You're learning to be understood." He gave a low laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've built towers, negotiated mergers, yet I can't manage to spell my own name with my hands." "That's the point," Leah said gently. "This isn't about control. It's about presence. Eli doesn't need skyscrapers. He needs you to show up like this." Adrian nodded, trying again. This time his fingers moved more carefully, less rushed. When he finally spelled Adrian without mistake, Leah smiled. "Good," she said. "Now, something useful. Watch me." She signed deliberately, "I'm proud of you." He mirrored her, fumbling but determined. The first attempt was messy, the second a little smoother. By the fifth, it resembled the phrase she had taught him. Adrian exhaled, a strange mixture of relief and emotion in his voice. "I want that to be the first thing he sees from me. Not pity, not pressure, just that." Leah felt her throat tighten. For the first time, she believed he wasn't trying to fix Eli. He was trying to fix himself. They continued for an hour. Phrases like, "I love you," "I see you," "I'm sorry." Each one seemed to chip away at the marble mask Adrian carried, exposing the man beneath the billionaire. At one point, he paused, looking at the photograph of Catherine on his desk. His hand hovered over the frame. "She would have known how to do this," he said quietly. "She was always better at slowing down, listening. I rushed past everything, including her." Leah reached across the table, not touching the frame but letting her hand rest nearby. "You can't rewrite the past, but you can start speaking now, in a language that belongs to both of you." Adrian's deep blue eyes softened. He nodded slowly. "Then teach me every word I need." By the time Leah stood to leave, his hands were raw with effort, his pride tempered by humility. As she reached the door, he called after her. "Leah." She turned. "Thank you for not letting me hide behind donations and speeches." His voice faltered, then steadied. "You gave me a chance I don't deserve, but I intend to earn." She left the mansion with the card in her pocket, its ink fading, but its meaning stronger than ever. For the first time she believed the right moment had come, not for her, but for Eli. The auditorium buzzed with voices, the kind of restless energy that fills a room before something remarkable happens. Leah slipped into a seat near the back, clutching her notebook. On stage, tables displayed projects from students across the city: solar cars, model bridges, digital art. But her eyes went straight to Eli, standing nervously beside a covered object draped in black cloth. He wore a simple gray jacket, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his dark hair falling over his forehead. His eyes scanned the crowd, reading lips, calculating. When they landed on her, his shoulders dropped just slightly, like the sight of her steadied him. Then Adrian entered. The room tilted as whispers spread. "That's Adrian Hale." Cameras clicked, reporters shifted forward. He looked as flawless as ever in his navy suit and red tie, but tonight, Leah saw something different in his face. His hands moved restlessly at his sides, as if remembering the lessons they had practiced. Eli tugged at the cloth and revealed his project: a small robot shaped like a human figure, wires and sensors tucked neatly into its frame. The crowd murmured. Eli lifted his hands, signing with precision and speed. Leah whispered his words for the audience. "This robot recognizes basic ASL gestures. It sees movement, responds with light and sound. It's my way of saying machines can learn to listen, even if people don't." Gasps rippled across the room. The robot flickered to life, its head turning, lights glowing. When Eli signed hello, the machine chirped and flashed green. When he signed friend, it spun in a small circle, lights pulsing warmly. The crowd broke into applause. Leah's chest swelled with pride, but Eli's eyes weren't on the crowd. They searched for one person: Adrian. For a heartbeat, Leah thought he would sign something, anything, to his son. His fingers twitched, his jaw tightened. But then he stepped forward, taking the microphone. "My son's creation is extraordinary," he said smoothly, his voice carrying. "And I want to announce something tonight. We have arranged for Eli to join a medical program in Switzerland, designed to restore his hearing. The future we've all been hoping for is finally within reach." The room erupted in applause. Reporters scribbled furiously. Donors nodded in approval. But Leah froze. She looked at Eli, and her stomach dropped. The boy's face hardened, his body stiffening as though struck. He shook his head violently and signed with furious speed. "No, not your choice, not what I want." His hands slammed down on the table, the robot wobbling. Then he turned and bolted from the stage, weaving through the crowd. The room buzzed with confusion. Adrian held the microphone, his smile faltering, the mask cracking in front of dozens of flashing cameras. Leah stood, her heart pounding. She saw the truth as clear as the spotlight. Adrian had made the worst mistake of all, choosing for his son instead of listening to him. Without hesitation, she pushed past chairs and stunned guests, following Eli out to the side door into the dimly lit hallway. The hallway outside the auditorium was dim and silent, the sound of applause muffled behind thick doors. Leah found Eli in a deserted classroom, fists clenched, shoulders heaving. His robot sat on a desk where he had dropped it, wires rattling with the force of his anger. She approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "Eli," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear. She lifted her hands instead, her movements deliberate. "I'm here. Talk to me." His fingers flew, sharp and jagged. "He doesn't see me. He only sees what he wants. I'm not broken. I don't need fixing." Leah's throat tightened. She signed back, "You're right. You don't need fixing. You need someone to listen." Eli's chest rose and fell, his face flushed. Then his hands slowed, trembling. "Why can't he see me?" Before she could answer, the door creaked open. Adrian stood in the doorway, shoulders squared, but his face stripped of its usual confidence. For a long moment, he said nothing, watching his son with eyes that looked suddenly older. "Eli," Adrian began, his voice low, uncertain. He stepped forward, but the boy flinched, backing away. Leah raised her hand to stop him. "Don't speak," she said softly. Sign. Adrian swallowed hard. His hands shook, but he lifted them, forming the words they had practiced. I'm sorry. The signs were clumsy, uneven. But Eli froze, staring at him. Adrian tried again, slower this time. I was wrong. I was afraid. I failed you. Eli's lips trembled. His own hands moved quickly. Stop fixing me. Start seeing me. Adrian's jaw tightened, emotion cracking through his composure. His fingers hesitated, then shaped the phrase he had stumbled over a dozen times in Leah's study. I love you. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Eli's eyes filled, his anger collapsing into something softer, more fragile. He signed back with shaking hands. I love you too. The silence that followed was thicker than words. Adrian crossed the room slowly, lowering himself to his son's height. Eli didn't pull away when his father's arms wrapped around him. For the first time, the embrace wasn't for cameras. It was for them. Leah turned her face, blinking back tears. She touched the card in her pocket, the faded alphabet she had carried for years. Maybe, just maybe, this was the right moment she had been waiting for. The next morning, the Beacon Hill mansion felt different. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, warming the parquet floors. Leah sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, while Adrian and Eli faced each other across the room. No cameras, no audience, just father and son. Eli tapped the table nervously, his eyes darting between them. Adrian took a breath, then lifted his hands. His movements were halting, but clear. Good morning, Eli. Eli's lips parted in surprise. Slowly, he signed back, Good morning, Dad. The simplicity of it hit Leah harder than any grand gesture. A boy answering his father, a man choosing to learn his son's language. Adrian stumbled through another phrase, his fingers stiff. I'm proud of you. Eli blinked fast, his throat bobbing. He signed back, For real? Adrian smiled faintly, his hands trembling but steady. For real. Eli's shoulders sagged, a weight lifting. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his palm, and for the first time since Leah had met him, he looked like what he was, a 13-year-old boy, not a symbol, not a prop. Leah set down her coffee, her eyes damp. She pulled the faded card from her pocket and slid it across the table to Eli. This helped me when I started. I think it belongs to you now. Eli picked it up, his fingers tracing the worn ink. His eyes softened. Then he tucked it into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. Adrian watched, something breaking open in his gaze. What else can I learn today? He asked Leah. She leaned back, studying him. Not just phrases. You need to learn to listen with your eyes. To wait. To let him set the pace. Eli smirked, signing fast. Good luck with that. He doesn't know how to slow down. Leah translated with a laugh. Adrian caught the gist anyway. He smiled sheepishly and nodded. He's right, but I'm willing to try. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. For once, time didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a beginning. Leah glanced at them both, a quiet certainty filling her chest. Last night had cracked something open. Today, they were learning how to live inside that opening. And, for the first time, she believed they might just succeed. The school gym buzzed with restless energy, folding chairs packed tight, banners fluttering overhead. Graduation day. Leah stood near the stage, her interpreter's badge clipped to her blazer. Palms damp with nerves she couldn't explain. She had translated countless ceremonies, but this one felt different. Adrian Hale sat in the front row, shoulders broad in his navy suit, red tie sharp against his white shirt. He looked like a man carved from confidence. Yet, when Leah caught his eyes, she saw something else. Nervous hope. His hands flexed on his knees, as though rehearsing in his lap. Then Eli stepped to the podium, valedictorian sash draped across his chest. 13 years old, small beside the microphone, but steady. He scanned the audience, his eyes locking first on Leah, then on his father. Instead of speaking, he raised his hands. The room hushed. Leah's voice carried for the crowd, her tone soft, proud. "My name is Eli Hale. I stand here today not because I can hear, but because I was finally heard." Gasps rippled through the audience. His hands moved again, fluid, confident. "For years, I thought silence meant invisibility, but silence can also be strength, a language of its own." Leah's throat tightened as she translated. She saw Adrian lean forward, his eyes shimmering. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Adrian stood. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands and signed along with his son, the same phrases Leah had taught him in the quiet of his study. "I'm proud of you. I love you." Eli faltered mid-sentence, his eyes widening. Then his lips curved into a smile so unguarded, so pure, it silenced the room. He signed back, "I love you too, Dad." Applause thundered through the gym, but for Leah, the sound faded. All she saw was father and son, finally speaking in a language beyond words. When the ceremony ended, Adrian took the podium. "Tonight," he said, voice thick, "we begin something new. In memory of Catherine Hale, who believed in every voice, spoken or signed, we are establishing the Catherine Hale Foundation for Deaf Education and Inclusive Design." He turned, gesturing for Leah to join him. Her breath caught as the crowd cheered. "Leah will serve as program director," Adrian announced, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Together, we will make sure no child grows up unseen." Eli rushed forward, wrapping his arms around them both. For the first time, Leah didn't feel like an outsider peeking into someone else's world. She was part of it. And, as the three of them stood beneath the banners, applause crashing like waves, she knew this was not an ending. It was the beginning of a language, a bond, and a family that would finally last. That evening, the gym had emptied, but the echoes of applause still seemed to linger in the rafters. Leah walked with Adrian and Eli toward the school courtyard where strings of lights glowed faintly against the deepening Boston sky. Eli darted ahead, his valedictorian medal bouncing against his chest. He carried the faded index card Leah had given him, tucked carefully into his pocket as though it were treasure. At the fountain in the center of the courtyard, he pulled it out, showing it to his father. His hands moved quickly, sharp in the light. "This card helped her. Now it helps me. It can help you too." Adrian took the card, turning it over with careful fingers. His deep blue eyes softened. "Thank you, son," he said quietly, then signed the same words. Clumsy, imperfect, but real. Leah stood a few feet away, her arms folded, watching them. For the first time, Adrian wasn't a billionaire or a polished public figure. He was just a man kneeling by a fountain, learning his child's language one halting phrase at a time. Eli laughed silently, then grabbed Adrian's hand, tugging him toward the water's edge. With a dramatic flourish, he tossed a coin into the fountain, closing his eyes. When he opened them, he signed, "Wish made." Adrian chuckled. "What did you wish for?" Eli shook his head, grinning. "If I tell you, it won't come true." Leah stepped closer, her voice light. "I think it already has." They turned to her. In their eyes she saw gratitude, but more than that, she saw belonging. Adrian slipped the card back into Eli's pocket. "This isn't just your symbol anymore," he said, his voice steady. "It's ours." Eli beamed. The boy who once stood alone in a ballroom now anchored between two people who finally saw him fully. The three of them lingered there as the city hummed beyond the gates, the fountain whispering behind them. Boston lights sparkled against the river, but it was the quiet glow around them that mattered most. For Leah, this was no longer about survival, invoices, or rent. It was about the right moment, finally arriving. For Adrian, it was the second chance he thought he'd never deserve. For Eli, it was proof he was never just decoration. Together, they had built something stronger than steel towers or polished speeches. a language, a family, a future. And as they left the courtyard hand in hand, the night around them carried not silence, but promise.